Are UFOs a threat to national security? This ex-US official thinks that they warrant investigation, and I agree with him. Throughout his distinguished government career, Chris Mellon has been keenly focused on the prospect of unconventional national threats, and now he works with a civilian group called the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, trying to prove that the U.S. defense and intelligence communities investigate reports of unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, also known as UFOs by us, that maneuver in ways that have no known precedent. He's inspired, and he says, by the growing number of such sightings in sensitive military contexts, and even more are going to be available to us because this spring the UK government is going to declassify all their UFO extraterrestrial files to be made public to anyone to investigate. So he says that the military context reported by highly trained, highly credible witnesses and corroborated by some of the world's most sophisticated technology, including several infrared videos shot from the fighter jets. He doesn't claim to know what these unusual crafts might be, nor does he assume they bring aliens from afar. To him, they signal a potential high-level strategic threat of unknown origin, one the nation would be foolish to ignore. Mellon is uniquely qualified to assess such threats, having served as Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence during the Clinton and George Bush administrations, and later as Minority Staff Director of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He was heavily responsible for reviewing agencies and budgets involved in top-secret black programs related to things such as special operations and nuclear weapons. Mellon is now an integral part of the investigation team featured on History's Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. Now, what does he think should be done about this? Why raise the alarm now about UFOs or AAVs? What's really motivating me right now, and what really has accelerated and solidified my interest, is the 2004 USS Nimitz UFO encounter. This is known as the USS Nimitz case. He says, when I learned of that and began to talk to the military personnel involved, we had multiple naval aviators reporting what they saw: wingless UFOs with extraordinary capabilities in broad daylight over an extended period of time. It was corroborated by the most sophisticated air defense systems, sensor systems on Earth, and on multiple platforms operated by multiple independent individuals. So when you start talking about that level of evidence, I think any reasonable person would have to say, this is real and we should proceed accordingly. Which means what? Intelligence gathering, risk assessment? From a national security standpoint, of course, you're paid to be paranoid, to think about risk. So you do inevitably wonder, why are these things currently in these locations at these times? Have we been technologically leapfrogged? Could it be the Russians or Chinese or someone else? And what else may be going on? There are craft that are violating our airspace with unknown intentions and extraordinary capabilities. And until we get some answers to the questions about the technology involved and the capability and intentions, we should not rest easy. And I totally agree with him. He says, I have lived through and survived intelligence failures, including 9/11 attack, Pentagon, Iraq war. Some of those problems are manifest in the situation again today, and that's part of what concerns me. People are not paying attention or not engaging, and the data is extremely compelling. We don't want to have to relive mistakes we've seen in the past. For example, like Pearl Harbor, where radar blips were observed and nobody paid attention. When the Nimitz pilots got back to the aircraft carrier, no one took their report seriously. It was extraordinary that when the Nimitz pilots landed, that they were ridiculed. There was no interest expressed on the part of the intelligence personnel on board in terms of documenting this, running this up the chain. It was the inverse of what you would normally expect. We spent $50 billion a year and have an intelligence apparatus in large part to avert strategic surprise. And here we have a case where incredible technology is manifesting itself, intelligently controlled vehicles operating in and around the carrier battle group, and the system doesn't react. It shuts down and it tries to suppress the information. And why do you think that is? I think a large part of the reason is because people have a hard time processing something so radical. There's no frame of reference for it. There's a great deal of agitation on the part of our combat personnel who are encountering these objects, and understandably so. Their concerns are what we're trying to relay. We respect the uniform, we respect those personnel, and we're deeply concerned that the information they're trying to provide is not being acted on. If one of these craft bore a Russian insignia, do you think the response would be different? One of the things that I've often pointed out, and I've never found anyone who disagrees with this, is that if any one of these objects had a Russian insignia on it, the entire system would be electrified and would spring into action. 60 years ago, the public was rightly agitated to learn that the Soviet Union had beaten us to space, had developed the first man-made satellite in orbit. That capability and the momentum they were achieving with their space program understandably generated a lot of concern here in the context of the Cold War. I would hope that people, when they get this information, would react now as the public did then, which is to raise questions about what we are doing in response to that. How has that question raising gone for you inside the Beltway? When you're talking to people about this issue in the Pentagon, you're going to draw blank stares. Even from very high-ranking officials, very, very few of them have any exposure to the actual underlying information with the empirical data. So there's a propensity for people to say, well, if this were real, I'd know about it because I'm well plugged in, I've got all these security clearances, and I get access to all this information. Well, the fact is, the information has not been disseminated through normal channels. Didn't the U.S. government investigate UFOs during the Cold War? In the 1940s, shortly after the war, the military began to encounter an increasing number of UFOs, and the number of incidents spiked enormously. They recognized the need to try to understand the phenomenon, which resulted in a series of investigations culminating in the Air Force's Project Blue Book, a program that lasted until the late 1960s. We know from documents that in New Mexico, the director of Air Force Security was advocating a study of the phenomenon because so many people in and around Los Alamos and other facilities where nuclear weapons were being tested were observing these anomalous crafts. Scientists, military pilots, civilian pilots, and a wide range of individuals. Ultimately, the government determined it needed to damp down the public concern, in part because during the Cold War this could create some kind of hysteria. The government concluded behind the scenes that it needed to discredit this phenomenon, not due to a lack of compelling information. It was actually the result of compelling information, and when the Air Force undertook the study, they examined 12,000 cases, and of those, 700 were unexplained. Now, could these crafts be ours? The first question all of us have asked when we've seen this information is, could this possibly be one of our own programs, a highly classified U.S. test program, perhaps? I served in a capacity in which it was my job to conduct oversight of our black programs, and never saw anything of this kind in the books. Moreover, I was once actually specifically asked to determine whether we had a capability along these lines in response to a query from the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Bob Byrd. I ran that all the way up the flagpole with the Air Force and others, and believe me, everyone respected Senior Byrd. No one has gone to lie to him and risk his wrath. And the answer was absolutely not. We don't have a super secret black triangle that can go at hypersonic speeds and all that sort of thing. Secondly, a technology like this is so radical it can't just appear out of nowhere. There have to be facilities. There has to have been research and development, a prototype. We don't see any evidence of that anywhere. Thirdly, these crafts are being observed operating in and around carrier battle groups that are armed with air-to-air missiles and so forth. We never, to my knowledge, put at risk those personnel or test personnel by flying them in an uncoordinated manner against carrier battle groups. That's just not how we operate. Chris Mellon and Luis Elizondo to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Now, we talk about Stars Academy where you work with Tom DeLong and Luis Elizondo. What's the mission? They are not necessarily asserting that these are alien craft or anything of the kind. There are people like me who see this as an incredible mystery, an enigma that needs to be resolved. we're helping to change the climate, I think, and establish that there are reasonable, level-headed, patriotic people who are willing to speak about this. And what role do they play? My goal personally, in my role within the organization, is to help break down the bureaucratic walls that are preventing this information from reaching Congress and the American people. I'm not trying to drive any particular agenda. I want to ensure, if possible, that people who have responsibility for national security are informed and have the facts and the data. Now, is anyone else exploring these questions? One of the things that's really exciting to me is that we're one of the only 3 efforts in the world that are currently in a position to potentially answer the profound, timeless question, are we alone in the universe? Today, NASA is spending about $20 billion a year, $20 billion a year. A small portion of that is directed towards trying to uncover identity exobiology, to identify exobiology, that is alien life, and they're looking for a microbial life on Mars. And when they want to use the next generation of space telescopes to examine the atmospheres of different planets for molecules that would be consistent with life. Not necessarily intelligent life, but some kind of life. So that's a very slow-moving, wonderful program, exquisite science, but not likely to answer the question anytime soon. There's a Russian billionaire who has self-funded a program listening for signals from space that might reveal alien communications. It's a very worthwhile effort. But so far, they've had no success. We probably don't even know what to look for. We probably wouldn't recognize signals, so it's a difficult proposition. And the third effort that we're associated with is trying to convince our government to use the capabilities it already has to understand the UFO phenomenon. And if we find out that it's the Russians or Chinese or others, then we've done a great thing for the country and for national security. And this is by History on Nexus Newsfeed. Please leave your comment. Tell me what you think these things could be. Well, Manly P. Hall told us that he believes that it could be the Atlantean aircraft, spacecraft that are still around, because we know that the Atlanteans used to live for thousands of years. And according to the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean, they're still around. Anyway, leave your comments. Thank you so much. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.